All right, so for Algebra 2, Semester 2, page 331, we'll start with number 1. We're going to go at the book page. So page 331 says, graph each equation, label the vertex and axis of symmetry, find all intercepts. You may wish to check your graphs on a computer or a graphing calculator. If you had that information, you could check them on those things. I don't have graphing calculators. Some of your phones might, if you know how to play with those things. But let's start with y equals negative 3x squared. Now I do want to first show you the t-chart, because that's the basic way to graph. If you're going to graph something, probably the easiest way to understand is just plug in 3 numbers for x and see what you get. Like plug in a 0, maybe plug in a 1, maybe plug in a 2 or a negative 1, and see what your graph starts to look like. So a couple things you need to know though. Since this is a quadratic, got x squared here, that means it's either going to be a U shape or an N shape. And since this number is negative in front, that's going to mean it's going to be an N-shaped curve. So that's something that automatically you're looking for on your graph, is that it's going to be an N shape, upside down, not the U shape.
Wait, so if that first number is negative,
it's going to go down. Yeah, if the first number is positive, it'll be a U shape. So when I plug in a 0 here, and when you plug these numbers in, just show me that you plugged them in, like this, y equals negative 3, 0 squared. That's the work that I would want to see. I want to see that you plugged it in.
Why did you circle the 2?
Because I was telling you it was a quadratic. That's what that 2 means. The quadratic graph. So when I solve this, now you could probably do this in your head, because 0 squared is 0, and 0 times negative 3 is still going to be 0. So when I plug in a 0, I get out a 0. That's going to be 1 point on my graph. So let's set up a little x and y graph on our paper, and we're going to put a dot at 0, 0. My y-axis, there's my x-axis. So you got a little graph on your paper, and you put a dot right at the origin. Now let's plug in a 1. So y equals negative 3 times 1 squared. Again, you could probably do that in your head. I just want to see that you wrote it down where you plugged it in. If you can do it in your head, now do it in your head. So 1 squared is 1 times it by negative 3, and you're going to get negative 3. So if you plug in a 1 to your graph, you're going to get out a negative 3. So over 1 and down 3. If I plugged in a 2, you get y equals negative 3 times 2 squared. What is 2 squared? 4, right? 2 times 2 is 4. And what's 4 times negative 3? Negative 12. That's a big number. Do we really want a graph where negative 12 would be on our graph? I mean, we could, but it would probably be, if we go over here, it'd probably be like way down here somewhere. So what do you think I should have plugged in instead of the 2, maybe? Maybe negative 1, because it'll be on the other side of the graph. So let's plug in a negative 1 as well. So y equals negative 3 times negative 1 squared. First thing you got to do is square the negative 1. What is negative 1 times negative 1? 1. And then times it by negative 3, and you're going to get negative 3 again. So you put in a negative 1, you're going to get out a negative 3. There's your U-shaped curve right there. So you could see the U-shape developing. If I put in a negative 2, I'm probably going to be way down here again, because it's going to be a bigger U. These go on forever. These U's, lines can go on as far as you want to put them in. Now it says to label the vertex So what's the vertex on this graph?
Zero.
The 0, 0 point. The vertex is the middle of your curve, right? So this is right here. Let's put a little arrow, vertex. And it also says label the axis of symmetry. Symmetry would be like, my hands would have symmetry because if I fold one hand on top, they're the same, right? That's what symmetry is. So where do you see symmetry on that graph? What line would be my symmetrical line? The y-axis. If I was to fold it right there, this would land on top of that. It would be just one curve, right? So right here you would put axis of symmetry.
Is the y always going to be the axis?
No, the graphs might be shifted a little bit here and there. So right now that's just the y. And you could also put that it's the x equals 0 line. That's what we would call that line, x equals 0. Because on that line, x is 0 everywhere. You would have the point 0, 0, 0, 1, 0, 2, 0, 3, 0, 4. X is always going to be 0 on that line. Now, if you here. Okay, look back at page 326 for a second if you have your book. If you have your book, look back at page 326 at the very top. And it gives you a form. Y minus k equals a parentheses x minus h squared. Okay, what this is right here is this could help us find the axis of symmetry and the vertex pretty quickly. The h and the k would be your axis, or no, would be your vertex. The h and the k would be the vertex, right where h and k are. So let's look at this first problem, and let's see if we can figure out how to put this in this format. Is there anything next to the y? But there could be. We could put y minus 0, couldn't we? Isn't that the same as y? So instead of y minus k, right here, I could actually change this to y minus 0. That's the same thing. Here's my negative 3. Could I put x minus 0 squared? Is that still going to be x squared? If I do x minus 0, is that still x? Okay, so do you notice that this is a 0? This is a 0, and what was my vertex? 0, 0, right? So whatever numbers were, basically, whatever number would solve this. 0 would solve this, so 0, 0 would be your vertex. And your axis of symmetry then is going to be the x equals 0. Whatever the x one is, whatever the x is in our vertex is going to be the axis of symmetry. Let's try number 2. No. Let's do one where it's already in that format for us. 2 and 3 you're going to do like I did. 4 you're going to do. Let's go to 5. 2, 3, and 4 you are going to do this right here. Okay, so just plug in the 3 or 4 points and find the curve. Label your axis of symmetry and label your vertex. But when we get to 5, let me show you on 5. So you can leave some space on your paper, or you can just do them at the end. I don't care, as long as they're all on your paper. Number 5, you've got y equals negative, no, positive, it's x minus 3 squared. Now what I want to do is I want to change this to y minus 0. And I want to see if we could figure out what the vertex is just by looking at that problem. What do you think the vertex would be? Close.
Or 0.
Close. 0 is right at the back.
Oh, 9.
What could I put in here to make it equal to 0? What minus 3 would equal 0? 3. So the vertex is going to be the point 3, 0. What is going to be my axis of symmetry? All you got to do is look at the x. What's the x? 3. So your axis of symmetry is x equals 3. So what this graph is going to look like, you're going to have a vertex of over 3 and of 0. You're going to have a symmetrical, that's going to be your axis of symmetry is going to be where the 3 is right here. Now I would suggest, and we know it's going to be a U shape because it's positive. There's no negative in front. We know it's going to be a U shape. I would suggest maybe plugging in a 2 and a 4 just to see where the 2 points would go. So you might go back to your original equation and plug in 2 minus 3 squared. What is 2 minus 3?
-1.
Negative 1 squared is 1. So that means that when we put in a 2, we got out a 1. And if it's a symmetrical graph, what do you think is going to happen if we put in a 4? It's also going to be a 1. So you can see where your curve is going to go right there. So if it's already kind of in this format, you can find your vertex faster. And that way you only have to plug in 2 points to see where the symmetrical curve is, if it's in that format. If it's not in that format, then you're just going to want to use the t-table and plug in 3 or 4 points. But if they're in that format, it does make it a little bit easy for you. So number 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12 are all in that format. Let's do 7. You guys can do 6. Let's try 7. We've got y plus 2 equals x minus 1 squared. So first off, let's see if we can find our vertex. Think about what would make each one 0. But what would make each side a 0? A negative 2 for the y value. What would make the x value become 0? Positive 1. There's your vertex. Your axis of symmetry is x equals 1. That's going to be your axis of symmetry. So if you draw your graph, you're going to go to this point, the 1, negative 2, right to that point. Over 1 and down 2. So it'll be right there is going to be your vertex. Am I looking at a U or an N?
U.
U, that's right. This is positive here. There's no negative in front of the x, so it's going to be a U-shaped curve. Now I want to plug in a 0 and I want to plug in a 2. So really all I need to do is plug in those 2 points, one on each side. So plug in a 0, plug in a 2. So y plus 2 equals 0 minus 1 squared. So it looks like y plus 2 equals 1, because negative 1 squared is 1. Subtract 2 on both sides, y is going to be negative 1. So when we put in a 0, we got out a negative 1. When you put in a 2, you're also going to get out a negative 1 because it's a symmetrical graph. So there's your curve. That's how fast you can graph them. You don't have to put them all in. If you're in this format, it will work. And then that's what I said. 1 through 4, you're just going to have to make the T-chart. But when we do 5 through 12, you can do them quicker because they're in that format. All right, I'm going to stop there and give you 15 minutes. All right, let's take a look at 3. What does the equation say? Okay, what I would probably do is I'd probably add 4 to both sides, just so I'd have y by itself. And then I would plug in a 0, maybe a 1, maybe a -1, just to kind of see where the graph's going to come out. So y equals -0 squared plus 4. -0 squared is still just 0, right? So you're going to get a 4 there. So 1 point on my graph is 0, 4. And I'm looking at an n-shaped curve because I know that this x squared is a negative, so it's going to be a downward curve. If I plug in a 1, y equals -1 squared plus 4. Now, notice how I put the -1 in the parentheses. This negative in the right here is going to be after you square it. So you got to square it and then you got to bring it negative. So you're actually getting a -1 plus 4, which is a 3. So 1, 3 is 1 point. And then if I plug in a -1, you're going to get the exact same thing because -1 squared is 1, but then you got this negative on the outside. So it's still going to become a negative and then a +1. So -1 plus 4 is still going to be 3. So if you went over -1, you still went up 3. There's your U-shaped curve. Your vertex is the point 0, 3. Or 0, 4, I mean. X equals 0 is your axis of symmetry. Okay, let's look at 6. Let me just borrow this. Okay, we've got y equals -x plus 3 squared. Okay, if I wanted to put it in the right format, I would put y minus 0, because there's nothing next to the y. -x plus 3 squared. Now I should be able to find my vertex already. What is the vertex going to be? A 0 is your y value, so that's going to go in the y value. What makes this parenthesis come out as a 0? It's going to be a -3. There's my vertex. So when I draw my x and y axis, I'm going to go over -3, up 0. I'm going to make a dot right there. Okay, because this would be 0. This would be -3. That would make that 0. To get your vertex, you got to find out what would make it equal to 0, because that's the vertex. So a 0 and a -3, but your x is -3 and your y is 0. So -3, 0. Now your axis of symmetry is x equals -3. And I would plug in 2 points. Actually, I would just plug in 1 point because I know it's symmetrical. So if I plug in a -2, -4 is going to have the same answer. So -2 and -4 should both have the exact same answer. So let's go back to our original problem, put in a -2 for x. So you'll have y equals negative parentheses, -2 plus 3 squared. In your head, what is -2 plus 3 squared, or -2 plus 3? What do you get? -2 plus 3 more. That's a 1. What's 1 squared? 1. And then you got a negative up front. So you're going to end up with a -1 here. So if you plug in a -2 for x, you get out a -1 for y. So -2, -1. So it looks like it's a U-shaped curve, an N-shaped curve like it should be because that's a negative right there. Negative tells us it's an N-shaped curve. So if you put in a 4, you're also going to get out -1. Because you'll get -1 squared is still 1, and then you bring over the negative, you'll get -1. So either way, you're going to get that -1 to come out with either of those two. There's your curve. Your axis of symmetry would be the x is -3. This would be a dotted line where you could fold the graph. If you folded it on this line, you would see one side would land on the other side. That's your symmetry. Well, that's what you should have on 1 through 9. That kind of stuff. Couple more minutes, finish that side, or do you want to move to the next side? Any more minutes? Okay. 10 more, or 5 more, or what? About 10?
Yeah.
Zero is always the easiest one. I would always put zero. And then 1 and 2 are always the easiest one. And -1, 2, 3. Sometimes the negatives get a little weird, you know. So those are the common numbers to plug in. But you can always plug in other stuff. If you see a fraction, so you're going to want to put in a 0, maybe a 2, so that the 2s will cancel out, maybe a 4. Things that you can get to cross cancel. These are the most common. Y equals 0 squared plus 0. I guess let's get rid of both of them. So this 0 is going in for this x and that x. So you're going to put 2 times 0 over here. Yes. So you're going to get 0 plus 0, 0. So that's 1 point on your graph. It's 0, 0, 0. Your x-axis, your origin is 1 point. We're going to do this one on the board in a minute. Where you have it.
Okay, about 7 minutes, and then I'll move on to the next page to try to get those done within the next 7. Guys, I'm leaving this basically up to you guys to work. I'm not gonna walk around and beg you to work. If you don't work, you don't pass. If you work, you pass. So it's up to you. I mean, I'm leaving it your responsibility. You're big people now. You're young adults where you can decide where you're either going to work or you're not going to work. I'm just the recorder. You give it to me, I look it over, I make sure it's done, and I record it. And I help you if you need help. So, you guys, it's up to you. If you want the credits, then just come and get the work done. For those of you that didn't finish yesterday's, they should be up here already. Should have done it on home last night. Alright. I would do the vertex right away. It's already in the format for it. Vertex is going to be a -2 and a 5. -2, 5. If I put a -2 in here, that would be 0, right? Yeah, so I might have a vertex. If I put a 5 there, that'd make that 0, so that's my y vertex. So I already know when I draw my graph, that point, -2, 5, is going to be my vertex. I already know that one point on my graph. Yeah. And then I know my axis of symmetry is going to be this line right here. My axis. Put that right there. Yeah. Now you probably want to put in a -1. If you want to see, it's going to be a M-shaped curve because of the negative. You plug in this point right here. Plug in a -1, you're also going to, -3 is going to be the exact same answer because it's a symmetrical graph. Yeah. So I would just take a -1 and put it in there. So y minus 5 equals negative parentheses -1 plus 2 squared. 4 minus 5, that's 1, right? Yeah. Squared is 1, and then the negative 1. Add 5. Y over -1, you go up to 4. -3. And -3 is also going to be because remember it's symmetrical. Yeah. So whatever you got on this side of the dotted line, you're going to have also on that side of the dotted line. There's your curve right there. I just don't get the first part. Finding out what would make this 0. Here's vertex. -2 plus 2 would be 0, right? I'm just asking myself, what could I put in for x that would make this parenthesis 0? And I put in a -2 right there. -2 plus 2 would be a 0, right? So -2 is what your vertex is. It's going to be whatever makes it equal 0. Try to make it 0, then try to make that 0. What's going to make this 0 is going to be a +5. Always see what would make it equal 0. That's going to be your vertex. About 4 minutes. We'll start the next page. Yes. Nothing? Sure. Got it all figured out?
Yeah, but they told me that I have to go to the back counter because they gave me this like, okay, so then what do I do? After I do this, she was like, bring it back to them tomorrow. And I was like, so what do I do about my classes? And then she's like, I can get all that information from you back.
Yeah. No, this just needs to be turned in so that you can get the credit.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Just that thing to your first grade teacher. Do you have first grade teacher?
Yeah.
Say to them, or
They-
take it to 119
yeah,
tomorrow
yeah,
or
they,
whatever.
that's what they said, bring it to 119. But then I was like, so what about my classes? What have I been using credit for my
Oh,
classes?
yeah, it's fine. As long as that's turned in by the end of the year, by the end of the summer, you're fine. But I mean, they want them now.
Yeah, they
But really, as long as they get it by the end, you're okay. But they really want it now. By tomorrow would be good. All right, so ask yourself, what can I put in for X that would make this whole thing a 0? -2, right? -2 plus positive 2, 0. So my vertex would be -2. What would make this one equal 0? Okay, it would be positive 5. 5 minus 5 is 0. You already know one point on your graph. You draw your graph. You go over -2. You go up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's your vertex. Okay, and if this is going to be a U-shaped graph, but that's a negative right there. Okay, so I know that I want to put in -1 and -3 because those are on the opposite sides of the point. I'm going to put in a -1, and whatever I put in to get here, I'm also going to get the same answer for -3 because it's a symmetrical graph. They're going to be sitting on each side. So we're plugging in -1 here. So 5 minus 5 negative, correct? -1 plus 2. Y minus 5. Negative 1. I put -1 in for X, so -1 plus 2 squared. Y minus 5 negative. Now, if I look at this, -1 plus 2 is a 1. Okay? 1 minus 5. 1 squared is still 1. Now, this negative is outside, so I got to put negative with whatever answer I get, which is 1. Now, if I add 5 to both sides, I get y equals 1. 4 is going to be -1, and it's the same answer because it's the same on both sides. So here's your 4 here, here's your 4 there, here's your curve. Good. All right.
All right, we need to move on. So, I gave you guys an extra 3 minutes there. Let's do it at page 336. Oh man, I was recording that whole time. Great. Sorry about that, people watching the video. Just fast forward that. 336. I don't know why I put 13. And we'll start with number 1. I'm pretty sure these are pretty close to what we were working on a second. Okay, so 336, number 1 says graph each function. So we've got f of x equals x squared minus 1. Okay, so what I mean, there's quite a few ways you can do this graph. I mean, it says graph it. So if you'd rather do the x and y chart and just plug in some numbers, you can. If you want to do the y equals x squared minus 1, and you could change it. You could add 1 to both sides. So y plus 1 equals x minus 0 squared, and we would have it in the same format that we had those other ones in. So with this right here, you could find your vertex. It would be a negative 1 would make the y 0, so your negative 1 would be in the back, and a 0 for x. So 0, negative 1 would be your vertex. So over 0 and down 1. It is a U-shaped curve. And you would probably then plug in a 1 to see what you get. And whatever you get for 1 is also going to be the same answer for negative 1 because it's a symmetrical graph. So if you plugged in a 1, you would get 1 squared is 1. Minus 1 would be 0. So if you plugged in a 1, you get 0. If you plugged in a negative 1, you'd also get 0. They're symmetrical. So there's your U-shaped graph like that. Okay, so 2 is the exact same as this one, except instead of a 1, it's a 4. So you can do the exact same thing, except for where you put the 1, you're going to put a 4. So all those 1s will be 4s. So on number 2, that's really, really close. It's just going to be a 4 there. Number 3 we'll do together. It says f of x equals x minus 1 squared plus 3. Let's subtract 3 on both sides and change this to a y. F of x you could change to y because that's what we would use for our function. We would use a y value. Okay, so you have y minus 3 and then you have x minus 1 squared. So it's back in the format that we like. That's easy to graph. You can find your vertex really quick here. The vertex is what's going to make the x0 is going to be a positive 1. What's going to make the y0 is going to be a positive 3. So if I put a 1 here, that becomes a 0. If I put a 3 here, that becomes a 0. That's your vertex. You find that vertex on your graph. Over 1, up 3. So there's your vertex. We know it's going to be a U-shaped curve. So that means I want to plug in a 2 or a 0, either one, and it's going to be above a 3. Our answer should be higher than 3 because it's a U-shaped curve. So let's plug in 0. That's an easier one to plug in. 0. So we're going to get y equals, actually, let's put it right here. Y minus 3 equals 0 minus 1 squared. So y minus 3 equals negative 1 squared is 1. And if I add 3 to both sides, I get y equals 4. So that means 2 is also going to be a 4. So if I go over 0, I'm going to go up 4. If I go over 2, I'm going to go up 4. There's your U-shaped curve. So that's how you're going to do 3 through 6. So you're going to do 3 through 6 that way. So let me just pause it. Okay, there is number 4 if you need it. Let's get to number 7. Can somebody read it off to me? Is it f of x or is it y? Oh, it's h? Equals what? So it looks like that. All right, well, we could try to put it in our old format. Mr. Weberly. Hey. Yeah, I don't think he's here today. Is David Valdez Bustamante? No. Okay. Okay. Bye. Okay, so, but on this one, we've learned before about factoring, where we could break this down and get 2 solutions. Those 2 solutions would be the 2x intercepts. So if I put a negative 3 on top and I put a 2 on the bottom and put my x and my x, what multiplies to give me negative 3 and adds up to a positive 2? Multiplies and it gives you a negative 3, and you add them together, you get a negative 2. Good, close. No, you're right, negative 1 and 3. 3 and negative 1, yeah. You want the bigger one to be positive. So there's one parentheses, x plus 3, and your other parenthesis will be x minus 1. And we're going to find out what would make each one of them a 0. What's going to make this first parenthesis 0 right here? Negative 3, right? So that's one of my x-intercepts. What's going to make this one equal 0? What's going to make that parenthesis equal 0 right here? Positive 1. So let's take a look at where those 2 points are on our x-axis. So negative 3 is over here. Positive 1 is over here. Now, do you remember what kind of graph this is going to look like? Is it going to be a U or an N? It would be a U because that's a positive x squared, right? So I'm looking for a U-shaped curve that's going to have these two x-intercepts. So where do you think the vertex might be somewhere about? Think about the fact that these two have to be through the graph, right? So won't the vertex have to be halfway between those two? Where's halfway between them? 1, 2, 3, 4. So it's going to be right here, isn't it? So this is going to be my vertex. So I'm going to plug in a negative 1. Okay, so let's go over here, plug in a negative 1 and see what that point is. So negative 1 squared plus 2 times negative 1 minus 3. So you're going to get a 1 minus a 2 minus a 3. Who can do that in your head? 1 minus 2 minus 3. 1 minus 2 minus 3. Come on, you got this. 1 minus 2 is negative 1. Negative 1 minus 3 is? Starts with a negative. Ends with a 4. Negative 4, he's got it. Negative 4, all right. So we go over negative 1, we go down 4. So it's right here, that's your vertex. Now you have your U-shaped curve. You know where the 2 points are? So you just bring your U-shaped curve through those. And you have, if you have 2 solutions, those are your x-intercepts. You can factor those, they'll give you the x-intercepts. And I believe you can factor all of them 7 through 12. give you a break and just have you do 7 through 10. So we'll go up to 10 here. And yes, you can factor all those and get your 2 answers.
Whoever do you need, copies, anything, sketch on it?
I made the copies already today, so I'm good to go.
Good.
I appreciate
Have a
it.
good old man. Nice answer.
All right, thanks. Let's go to number 1. It says y equals x squared plus 2x. My suggestion is to just use the easy numbers, 0, 1, and 2. You might want to plug in a negative 1 if your U-shape is going to have, at the 0 point, you might need a negative 1. But just y equals 0 squared plus 2 times 0 is going to be 0. 0 plus 0 is 0. If I plug in a 1, 1 squared plus 2 times 1, 1 plus 2 is 3. If I plug in a 2, 2 squared, pen's not. 2 times 2, so 4 plus 4, you're going to get an 8. You might want to try a negative 1 just to see if we have a symmetrical where you get one of the same answers. So let's try a negative 1. Negative 1 squared plus 2 times negative 1. So that's going to be a 1 minus a 2, which is a negative 1. Still not a symmetrical graph. Let's graph those 4 points and see what it looks like. Find out where our symmetrical point will be. 0, 0. Make a dot at 0, 0. 1, 3. Go over positive 1 and go up 3. You have a graph on your worksheet, so you can just make those dots. Over 1 and up 3. Over 2 and up 8. You might not be able to do that one because the graph's not big enough. So let's go to the last one. Negative 1. Over negative 1 and down 1. That might be your vertex. If that's your vertex, when we plug in a negative 2, we should get a 0. Let's see what happens if we plug in a negative 2. So y equals negative 2 squared plus 2 times negative 2. And yeah, that works because you're going to get 4 minus 4, which is 0. So negative 2, 0 is going to be your other point. So you can see your U-shaped curve developing like that. That's going to be your U-shaped graph for number 1. What is number 2 going to look like? It's going to be an N. Yeah, it's going to be an N-shaped curve for number 2. So let's look at 2. Let's see. It would be nice to get the vertex right away with it. So what I would probably do, there's a couple ways to do it. I just don't want to confuse you. There's too many different variations. That's what I was worried about. That's why I think if you just learn to plug in numbers, it will always work. You'll always get your graph. We could try to find the vertex here, but that's going to be a little difficult. So let's just plug in the numbers. 0 in this case, if you put a 0 here and a 0 here, you're going to get negative 14. That's too big for my graph. So I'm not even going to try to plot that point because it's not going to be good enough for my graph. It looks like I'm going to want to put in negative numbers for x. You see how they only gave you negative? So let's plug in a negative 1 and see what comes out. Now, negative, and then we got to put negative 1 in parentheses squared because the x is the negative 1. This negative is on the outside. And then minus 8 times negative 1, and then minus 14. So you're actually going to get positive 1 here, but the negative is going to come in the answer. You're going to get negative 1. You're going to get a plus 8 because negative times negative is positive 8. And you're going to get a negative 14. So this is actually going to give you a negative 7. Negative 15 plus 8 would be negative 7. Could we graph that point on our graph? No. So we're going to need to go to negative 2. So y equals negative parentheses negative 2 squared minus 8 times negative 2 minus 14. So you're going to get negative 4 plus 16 minus 14. So that's going to give us a negative 2 result. That you can graph. So put that point on your graph, negative 2, negative 2. Over negative 2, down 2. That's one point that you could graph. Negative 3 you're also going to be able to graph. So negative 3 squared is 9, so we're going to need to put a negative 9. Negative 8 times negative 3 is positive 24 minus 14. So that's going to give you a negative 23, and a positive 24 is going to give you a 1. So negative 3, 1. Okay, you need stuff from me, right?
Do your thing.
Okay.
Oh,
I think
do you have anything in there?
I have these two for the work.
Did you grade them or did you grade
They're all
them?
graded.
Oh, you are?
They're all done. Everything's ready.
Try to stay on top of everything. Try. So that's period 1 and period 2 from yesterday's work. It's all graded, checked off. I checked it initial. Yep.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Is anybody in here only second period?
Yes, I have some of those. I have their folders.
Okay, and then you guys you have a separate folder, and then are any of you don't have a first period that are in there?
Yeah,
Just
well,
this is only second?
Yeah, that's the ones I have folders for.
Oh.
I don't have
daily
folders.
learning logs. That's
I
what
don't
that-
have the other daily learning logs for the people that have a first period. They already have their learning logs.
But you guys only have just, you only come for one class then?
Yeah, I have about 7 or 8
Oh,
of them. I just
wow,
got here.
okay.
That's why I needed those extra ones, because I had kids in the class that just had.
So you already asked that question, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, cool.
So
Well,
we
I'll
should
leave you.
be-
You look pretty good.
we should
I'll
be
take
okay.
it, and then I'll be back there.
Okay. Yeah, if you need anything else, or let me know. I'm gonna keep it great.
Right.
Give them marks.
Try to improve it. If you're not graded, I'm super coming back. Don't worry.
Okay.
I'm not.
All
I
right.
am.
Okay. All right. Like I told you, they're collecting your work every day. Every day they come in and get the folders and they get the new ones. Yeah. Okay, where was it? All right, so we know it's going to be an N-shaped curve, so it's looking like it's going to be developing right here. So if we plug in a negative 4, let's see if we get negative. We get negative 4 squared minus 8 times negative 4 minus 14. It's going to be negative 16 plus 32 minus 14. That's going to give us a positive 16, so it's going to be a 2. So over negative 4, that's 2. So that's your vertex right there. I can tell right now. That's going to be a vertex. If you put in the negative 5, you're going to get back up to here. So you can draw that point in. Negative 5 is also going to be a 1. And you'll have your N-shaped curve right there. That's basically what you're doing on these. Let's just do the odds on this one. I did 1 and 2, but now you can do 3, 5, 7, and 9. That way you don't have to be too buried with stuff. So just do the odds there. Finish up the 2 pages in the book. We just did 1 through 9 and 1 through 10. And then just do the odd ones on the worksheet. What I'm going to do also is put the worksheet answers on the podium, so that if you want to see if you got the graph right, you can go check. But make sure I have the work that you plugged in. If I don't see this, then I don't think you did anything. I don't want to just see the graph. I want to see this and the graph. So make sure you get them both. You should have the odd answers in the back of the book for the book one, so check those in the back of the book. Here are your graphs, answers to the ones that are on the worksheet. Semester 2. Semester 1, I also have your answers if you want to see them for your worksheet today. Okay, so semester 1 people, I know there's about 4 of you in here. Semester 1 people, I'm going to put your answers right here. This desk will have your answers. Podium has semester 2 answers if you want to check them out. The whatever you want. If you want to check them out, check them out. That's the one?
Yeah.
Yeah, so you're going to have to just do the chart. So 0, probably 1, probably -1, probably a 2. Just plug it in. It should be, they're small numbers, so it should go pretty quick. Some of them you can't factor. Now we could make it into our other format and get the vertex and stuff, but that's kind of extra. I would just do the key chart. Well, they never came back. I'll leave her to finish that ticket. Go back and finish your book pages first. Be easier to take the worksheet home and do that at home if you don't finish. Harder to take the books and stuff. So do the book stuff in class faster and then do the worksheet stuff. I'm just making you do the odd ones on the worksheet.
So